think you all probably are familiar with our speaker. Sorry.
All right. This is Dr.
Siva Sabartnam giving us a talk called Soil-Borne Pathogens of Strawberries and Their Prevalence in British Columbia.
Thank you. So this is one of the studies we've done. We have done 2 surveys for the last 15 years. One is in 2016, in 6, and then in 2016. Because our strawberry production in this is kind of very minimum, I would say, because most of them are raspberries and far more fields are converted into blueberry production. And also the production in California, strawberries are flooding into BC because the prices are down. So there are many reasons why the strawberry production is kind of a minimum. But even though we have a smaller production, there is a need to understand what's going on in strawberry fields. Because there is 2 production systems now. We have a June bearing, which is pretty standard, and also the very neutral and new introduction, which is a longer crop. And the people are wondering what kind of disease we are dealing with. The foliar, there are 3 different sections I would talk about when you come to diseases. One is the root or soil-borne diseases. Other one is the foliar pathogens. And one is the fruit rot. So the foliar and fruit rot pathogens are very well understood, and you can also see them visually on the ground and able to deal with them. But the soil-borne pathogens are very tricky because the symptoms are kind of overlap each other. So it's hard to understand them, what we are really dealing with. So the 2006 survey we did, we didn't really find any verticillium there and few other pathogens, but over the 10-year period, since we have evidence of verticillium in the soil, and there is also some surveys done on raspberries and whether they are affecting raspberries. And so far, we haven't really come across any impact on raspberries by verticillium. So the intention is to find out what's going on in the soil on strawberry fields. Am I doing wrong something here? Okay, jump. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, got it. So before we do this survey, we should have some idea what we are looking for in the soil. The symptoms-wise, as I said, is very difficult to understand, but the disease-wise, we know what we are looking for. If you look at this list, one is we call it black root rot, which is usually a complex disease caused by predominantly Rhizoctonia fragariae. We also call this as a kind of a cooler pathogens. It's only come early in the season or late in the season. And also to isolate these Rhizoctonia fragariae, we need to really do early studies like in the early spring, so you're able to deal with that. But if you try to isolate them in the summer, you will not be able to get them. But beside Rhizoctonia, we also have a bunch of other pathogens that can cause this disease. So we call it as a complex. And the second one I talked about is a wilt disease. There are 2 different pathogens that can cause wilt. One is verticillium, which is I would say it's a new emerging pathogen. And other one is a Fusarium oxysporum. There are lots of Fusariums in the soil.
I'm getting a frozen picture at the far side. Let me just complete this and pause. Yeah. Just 1 second, far side. Share screen. Somehow it got paused. There we go.
Okay, thank you. So the wilt is caused by 2, verticillium and Fusarium. Even there's a lot of different Fusarium species in the soil, and we don't know whether that's a wilt causing or just a root rot pathogen. Another one we call red steel, which is a Phytophthora frugaria, which is another pathogen that causes root rot primarily. And also beside that black root complex, we also have root rot, which is another, it's another individually they can cause this root rot, or it's collectively you can have a root rot issue. And beside root rot problems, you also can have crown rot, which is caused by another collection of different pathogens. So as you can see this slide, there's a complex problem, and it's not really we are dealing with one, maybe more than one pathogen in a particular field. The problem is I can't change the page here. Spacebar? It's kind of frozen.
Click on it and then hit right arrow. There.
Oh,
So right arrow.
oh, sorry. Okay. So this is the 2006 studies. This just to give a snapshot of what we have found in 2006. There are some within the number of plants we sampled, about 7% that will have Fusarium, and also we have Rhizoctonia, oomycetes. I dumped all the Phytophthora and Pythiums in one group, and others which are not really identified to a species level. So this is kind of a snapshot of pathogens we would find in 2006. But if you go further now, the objective with this 2016 is to understand the prevalence and distribution of these soil-borne pathogens in these strawberry fields. We did in two areas. One is the Fraser Valley, which is the southern border of US, which is starting from Delta to all the way east to Agassiz. And also we did some sampling in Vancouver Island. So approach is we did sample about 20 fields, which is about substantial number of fields in the strawberry production, both in Vancouver Island and Fraser Valley. And the fields are inspected 2 times, which is because we need to really catch what is going on in the early in the season and the late in the season, so that because the symptoms are different, the pathogens comes at different times. So we did 2 times sampling throughout the season, and we brought samples, symptomatic samples to the fields, which is from plant samples and soil samples, and we do some lab analysis. So there are few ways we identify the pathogens. One is visually examining the symptoms, and we try to isolate from the field the root system or maybe a crown, and we use various selective medium to select or identify different pathogens. And also we identify these pathogens by morphology and PCR and other means. We also did some soil analysis with pH and EC, because pH probably a determining factor may contribute to the health of the plant. And also we got some information from the growers based on the questionnaires. So this is the field, just to give an idea, which is the Vancouver Island. This is the lower mainland. Sorry. So this is the lower mainland area, and we have some 15 samples. One is starting from the east, which is most like Chilliwack, Abbotsford, all the way to Delta. We did about 15 fields in this particular area. And also we went to Vancouver Island, which is the circle in red, which is a small peninsula, Sanishan. That's probably a predominant area where strawberries and raspberry and also even blueberry production are concentrated. We did about 5 samples there, 5 fields. So these samples are analyzed in the lab, and I'm going to show some of the results. This is based on the questionnaires from the growers. I don't know whether it's underestimated, about 300 hectares, which is really not that big, I guess, in production, mostly in the Fraser Valley. And there are about 30 large and small scale producers in total in BC. And all transplants are coming from Sukuma Brothers, which is the one source of transplant originating from here. So all the growers we sample, they all bring planting material from Sukumas. And there are two types of strawberries I talk about. That is June bearing, which is traditional way of growing, and also we have ever bearing or day neutral ones. The predominant cultivars Albion. The soil pH range from 4.3 to 6.3. I think 4.3 is probably an acidic range. The strawberries probably prefer 5.5 to around 6. So there may be some pH issues in some other fields. And this is, I'm talking about three different, this is Raymond, who did some work on this, predominantly on this strawberry project. He's from University of Victoria, and he's having some fun in the fields, I guess, eating all the strawberries most of the time. And the basic production in strawberries traditionally the strawberries are produced on the flat ground. There is no raised bed. And in some other fields, they don't have irrigation system because given the moisture in the June and May, most of the fields, some fields are totally depending on rainfall. But the idea is not shifting now because last few years we are having a dry June month. So irrigation has become an essential on strawberry production. And also some of the production is done on raised beds without any top with irrigation system. And also this is some of the fields that have a top system. And here essentially they have either single or double drip irrigation. And this is also mostly I see this in the Vancouver Island, they put this top to prevent weed management. This stays throughout the year, and after 2 years, some of the crops are just 2-year crop maximum, or they go for 3 years. And only one production system I have seen in Abbotsford, it's grown under greenhouses. It's on a pot system. It's more like a polyhouse rather than greenhouse. It's more like an annual crop. Each year they replant, I think. So let's come to pathology, what symptoms we have seen in the field. This is a general, when you look for soil-borne pathogens, these are the kind dying plants or completely dead or partially dead, or some leaves are kind of necrotic lesions. These are the general symptoms we would see. But based on this symptom, as I said, it's very difficult to identify what causes these symptoms. When you take a closer look, the one on the far left upper corner, which tend to give some reddish kind of symptoms, that might indicate different things. It could be like pH, it could be some nutrient issues, or it could be some pathogens causing diseases. But if you have the lower panel, you have completely dead plants, and also on the far right lower picture, which is have kind of dead leaves at the base, and also some green leaves on the top. That is kind of a typical of verticillium, but still these symptoms again confusing to look at. So the best way to identify these is just you can really uproot the plant, wash them, and look at the root system. And this is typical symptoms for black root rot complex, which is caused by predominantly Rhizoctonia and also associated with other pathogens. So here you don't really see any kind of called fiber roots. It's all kind of primary roots. They are darkening and black root system. If you go to that far right corner, you have almost the roots are dead. You only see that rat-tailing kind of very skinny roots. But the thing is, if you cut the vertically, the crown system, the usually black root rot doesn't really impact the crown, only the roots. So this probably have a healthy root crown system, but the roots are really dead. That's one of the way of kind of identifying whether it's kind of, whether it's a crown issues or root issues. But then you have to really isolate and see what pathogens are going. So this is another way of looking at different root systems or crown rot. When you cut across the crown, the first left corner here, that's caused by Phytophthora cactorum, which is a crown rot. The Phytophthora, when you think it's in the soil-borne pathogen, then it starts from the root, invade through the crown, so lower crown would be rotted compared to the upper crown. Upper crown is usually, if you see a crown rot in the upper crown, that's probably caused by Coryphotrichum. That's because the pathogen is invading from the upper area of foliage and invading into the crown system. So that if you catch at the right time, you may be able to do that. And on the right corner, you will see a healthy crown. On the lower panel, it's caused by Phytophthora fragariae, which is also known as red steel, which is very commonly, you can see that if you watch the root, if you just have a vertical section, you can see the steel region is really red, dark red, and the roots kind of give a kind of pinkish red color. So that is caused by Phytophthora. Beside the root symptoms, we also notice some foliar diseases. One of the common one we see on strawberries are powdery mildew, which is the June-bearing plants are really kind of, they escape powdery mildew because harvest is done by June, but if you go into the day neutral, probably have some impact on the fruit size too, because the powdery mildew tend to kind of on a higher incidence and severity as the season progresses because it's like warmer temperatures. Also, we have noticed some deficiency, iron deficiency, nitrogen deficiency, and also phosphorus deficiency. This is kind of based on the symptoms. We haven't really done any tissue analysis. Based on the literature, we suspect it's probably due to some of the nutrient deficiencies there. So this is the results of what we have found in the field. So surprisingly, we have seen verticillium, which is about 25% of the field infected with verticillium, which causes wilt. And by the way, there's no kind of chemical treatment for verticillium, not only on strawberries or any other crop. It's one of the difficult pathogens to control. And all these things, I think it's commonly we expected that Rhizoctonia fragaria is very common in BC. About 55% of the fields are infected, and Phytophthora, but in my estimation, it's really underestimation of Phytophthora because the samples we got in the middle of the season or late in the season. So probably some of the Phytophthora we couldn't catch early. So that's probably the way it's coming as a very low percentage. Fusarium is very common, but Fusarium, keep in mind, some are weak pathogens, some are pathogens, some are saprophytes. So it's kind of an array of Fusariums, the isolates we have got from soils. And Cylindrocarp, which is a very known root rot pathogen. People won't pay a lot of attention for that one, but it can stand alone cause root rot as well. So if you look at the distribution of these pathogens within the field, the x-axis gives the number of soil-borne pathogens present, and the y-axis gives number of fields with multiple pathogens. So if you take the number of fields, only about 15% of the field we saw is free of pathogens. At least 15% of the fields have more than 2 pathogens. And if you take some of the fields have 5 pathogens, that means it's multiple infections going on. So even though we say, okay, this is going to cause by Phytophthora, we're going to have control over Phytophthora, but there are other pathogens involved. So it is a multiple conditions we are dealing in some fields. So this is a kind of the idea about what kind of fields. And if you see in the first column, you have number of fields, which is F1 to F20, and also different regions. If you say different group of pathogens, Cylindrocarpum, Coryphotrichum, Fusarium, Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, verticillium. And I just put some yellow box around there because those are the kind of important pathogens we are dealing with, Verticillium rhizotonia together. So some of the fields have very diverse pathogen distribution. So it is kind of, when it comes to management, it becomes very, very challenging because only we have some, I'm not really going to talk about chemicals here, but only some tools we have for Phytophthora. It is like oomycetes, we have some tools, but we have some tools for Rhizoctonias, but when it comes to Verticillium, there is nothing we can really use to manage them. So it's become a complex problem. But traditionally, the idea is to fumigate. That's what most of the raspberry fields do. The fumigate and plant, do the planting, and then 2 years, 3 years, they probably have good production, then the pathogens really recolonize. So since there's a lot of issues about fumigation, we have limited land and buffer zone issues, so people are tend to stay away from fumigation practices. So this is kind of a picture of all the isolates we got. And it's kind of nice to look at them, but they just have all the damage done to the crop in the soil. Just give some of the names associated with. We have Rhizoctonia fragaria, and there are also Rhizoctonia solani, which is a common soil pathogen, which can cause root rot itself. So those are the different pathogens. The cylindrocarbon in the middle row, all kind of, except one Polytotrichum on the left. The rest are all fusarium species. So it is taking time consuming to even characterize them. We have to look for special molecular markers and identify them. So it's all in the collection, probably we will get to that one day. And also Phytophthora, we have two different isolates. Probably one is Cactorum, other one is Phytophthora fragaria. So these are the ones we are dealing with in BC soils. PPMs are kind of generally common. They don't really standalone cause any problem, but they can really synergistic effect on the root system. So the fact is that once you have the introduction of these pathogens, soil-borne pathogens tend to stay in the root for a long time in the soil because some produce structures, they stay in the soil longer time, or they can be associated with plant residues or some root leftovers in the soil or carbon or organic matters. They can really tend to colonize them and stay in the soil for a long time. So some of the common, beside chemicals, there's some of the, I think these are probably the standard practices that any pathologist would recommend. Starting with clean pathogen-free stock, which is all the free stock is coming from one source. So hopefully all these are kind of produced in a disease-free environment, but there are always questions about planting stocks and whether they are introducing new pathogens. One of the examples is Verticillium. We never had Verticillium, or we looked for Verticillium in the soil associated with strawberries, but we are seeing more and more Verticillium in our soils. And the other reason would be because the temperature is higher now. We have hot, long summers. So Verticillium is a warm pathogen. And also it is produced under the top, black top, the soil temperature probably higher there. There may be some association with production systems as well. So there have been other worth of a study to look into any association with the cultural practices. And planting healthy sites, because it's limited in BC to go for new sites every time, or recommending about at least 3 to 5 year crop rotation. And consider pre-planting soil treatment, talk about those things, soil fumigation, and that's a general practice. And also we have tools for at planting or post-planting fungicide treatments. So especially for certain pathogens, especially Phytophthora, we have some chemicals for registered. For the Rhizoctonia, we have couple, but some are effective, some are kind of marginal. So it is kind of a very limited tool for strawberry production. And importantly, I think post-harvest field management to reduce inoculum level. That's very important because most of the infected plants were in the soil, and then they added to the inoculum for the next year. So by different means, we can reduce the organic matter in the soil. Plant refuse, that would be a best idea to manage some other diseases. So this is, I think, my last slide. I would like to thank Caroline Teasdale, which really came with us for a few fields to do some sampling, and strawberry growers, to all the 20 participants in the program. And this funding is done by the federal, provincial, territorial funding. We call it Going Forward 2. Now it's a new program. We call it CAP for the next 5 years. Thank you. And questions? Yes, Mike.
So macrophamina has become a big problem in California strawberry fields, and I'm just curious whether you think our environmental conditions are conducive to that being an issue up here, and whether you see that potentially coming at us down the road.
Oh, yeah, I think when we did 2016, we had that in mind to look for it, right? So we would say that's more like a warmer climate. I think that's probably the cause for there. You see more and more, but depending on the conditions now, we might be able to some introductions. And in history, we don't have it in this. But the thing is the introduction where they could establish and whether they come apart. So far we haven't seen in basic ways.
Siva,
yes.
My question is, in your survey that you included, the questionnaire for the growers, did you ask them what crop the field had previously been in? And if so, was there...
We had a question that's difficult. Most of the growers are same growers, and maybe I think most of the fields we visited, it's the same site they are growing strawberries repeatedly. Only one or two probably into fumigation, others they prepare the soil and then they replant it. So it is very difficult with the limited land, especially in the lower mainland. Yeah.
The second question. Would you suspect that a particular cultivar of raspberry could be a good host for any one of these pathogens? One variety over another.
Yeah, and it's a breeding program. Okay. So this is, we have only limited variety. If you look at the surveys, only about 3 different main ones. They neutrophilic for albion. That's the only variety we are growing. So there should be some kind of screening program, I would say, to assess the varieties associated with different diseases. So hard to say those ones from the limited studies we have done. But in generally breeding, I don't know whether that's geared towards, I don't know, there are some work going on I think, for resistant varieties towards verticillium, because it's just not really a easy pathogens to control. But from my work, there's limited data to analyze those ones. Yeah.
Hi, Siva. It's Tara, over in the corner.
Oh,
right over here. Look over far. Okay,
right.
Hi.
Yeah.
Just wondering, in California strawberries, there's a lot of work done on anaerobic soil digestion and on mustard seed meal practices. Have either of these two practices been evaluated in British Columbia?
For strawberries, I think I'm going to ask Tom to answer that question if you have any idea on, I think, nematodes, which I don't really work very much, but I don't think they are using at the moment, if I'm correct, Eric, you can correct me, are using, or you have any idea, Alf? You are using any? No.
We've tried, but not successful.
Those are all really very, unless you do it if you fumigate and then apply all these things, probably, but I think it's
in California, they're not fumigating, they're using those as alternatives.
Okay.
And the anaerobic soil digestion is something that I think could be really interesting. In California, they're using 7.5 tons an acre of rice bran, 1.5 tons an acre of mustard seed meal, and they're mixing that up. Then they're putting it under black tarp, solarizing it with a lot of sunshine and water, full irrigation. And the idea here is to actually is to cause an explosion of the pathogens, in which case the beneficials feed off of that. And I think it's really an interesting concept, and I wonder how it might fare if we were to trial something like that using maybe a poultry manure or a dairy manure source instead of rice bran.
I think it's okay. The solarization is not really can be done in DC because of the temperature difference, right? Because milder temperatures. But I think most of the studies, there are going on studies like that. I probably work to a certain extent, but I don't know whether there's any research going on. I don't think so. Eric? Disinfection, yes. Yeah.
I think it'd be good if we're low on time, so I think if we can continue this conversation maybe on a smaller scale a little later. But I'd like to get everyone to the next session and this break. So thank you so much, Dr. Sabartnam. So those of you looking for pest credits, they're going to be over here. I'm going to set them out in just 1 second. I'd like to remind you about those reviews I mentioned. We'd love to have your feedback. And just a reminder that we have a social hour today starting at 5 until 7 p.m. And it's sponsored by Berry Hill, Northwest Farm Credit Services, Oregon Blueberry Farms and Nursery, and Larson Gross. And it's going to be a lovely time. So if you have some time, you should stop by.
Yeah.